The warning spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried on encrypted channels, and whispered in the darkest corners of space stations. 3 simple words that made even the most hardened alien warriors pause. Never attack humans. Commander Zextar of the Krillian Empire stood before the holographic display in his war room, studying the tactical readout with growing frustration. His crimson eyes narrowed as he reviewed the intelligence reports flooding in from across the sector. Another human colony ship had been detected, this one heading toward the resource-rich Vegas system that the Krillians had claimed as their own. "Sir, the human vessel appears to be a standard civilian transport," reported his aide, a young officer whose scales still gleamed with the bright green of youth. "Our scouts estimate roughly 10,000 colonists aboard, along with basic terraforming equipment." Zextar's clawed hand clenched into a fist. The Krillian Empire had spent decades expanding their territory, crushing weaker species, and absorbing their worlds into their growing domain. They were apex predators, evolved from the deadliest hunters of their homeworld. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their warriors more ruthless than anything they had encountered. Until now. "And what do our intelligence networks say about these humans?" Zextar asked, his voice carrying the slight hiss that marked his species' speech patterns. The aide's green coloring dimmed slightly. "The reports are conflicting, sir. Some sources claim they are weak, emotional beings who value individual life over tactical advantage. Others suggest we should avoid contact entirely." "Superstitious nonsense," Zextar growled. He had built his reputation on crushing the seemingly impossible. The crystalline beings of Androxa Prime had seemed invincible with their energy-based forms, yet his forces had found their weakness and shattered their civilization in mere days. The hive-minded Sectai had appeared unstoppable with their perfect coordination, but Zextar had severed their communication networks and watched their unity crumble. Humans would be no different. "Sir," another officer called from across the bridge, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Velquan's fleet." The holographic display shifted, revealing the scarred face of Admiral Velquan, veteran of 100 campaigns. His expression was grim, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something Zextar had never seen before: fear. "Commander Zextar," Velquan's voice crackled through the communication array, "I'm transmitting this from the outer edge of the Terran system. My reconnaissance mission has encountered complications." "Report," Zextar commanded, noting the nervous tremor in the Admiral's usually steady voice. "We observed a human military installation. Standard procedure called for a probe strike to test their defenses. 3 of my destroyers moved within weapons range and fired a single salvo at what appeared to be an unmanned listening post." Zextar leaned forward. "And the humans responded within 14 minutes. Not with defensive fire or evacuation protocols, but with a full military mobilization. Commander, they deployed 17 battle cruisers, 43 destroyers, and over 200 fighter craft for a single listening post." The war room fell silent. Zextar's tactical mind raced. Such a response was militarily unsound, wasteful of resources. Unless they weren't defending the listening post, he realized aloud. "No, sir. They were hunting us. My scouts report human vessels spreading across 3-star systems, moving in patterns that suggest they're not just pursuing my fleet, but attempting to track our origin point. They're trying to find our homeworld." A chill ran down Zextar's spine, despite his species' naturally cold blood. "Surely you've evaded them? Your ships are among our fastest." Velquan's image flickered as his ship's power systems fluctuated. "That's what I thought. We executed a standard retreat, using our superior speed to outrun their vessels. But the humans, they don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't just chase, they predict. They've been laying traps along our escape routes, forcing us deeper into uncharted space." "Impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such preparations." "Commander, they're not using their regular military channels. Our intercepted communications suggest they've activated something they call Protocol 7. Even their own colonists don't know what it means." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving Zextar staring at empty space. He tried to re-establish contact, but received only static. Either Velquan's ship had been destroyed or he had cut communications to avoid detection. Sir, the young aide whispered, his scales now pale with fear. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to the Vega colony ship. Zextar turned away from the display, his mind working through the tactical implications. Velquan was no fool, and his fleet was among the Empire's most experienced. If they were struggling against human forces, perhaps there was more to these creatures than initial reports suggested. But retreat was not in Zextar's nature. He had not risen to command through caution, but through decisive action and overwhelming force. The human colony ship represented an opportunity to study these beings in controlled circumstances, away from their established military bases. Negative, he decided. We proceed as planned. The colony ship is isolated, likely protected by minimal escort forces. We'll intercept them before they reach Vega, conduct a quick capture operation, and extract intelligence about their capabilities. But, sir, if Admiral Velquan's report is accurate, Admiral Velquan engaged in direct confrontation with an established military installation, Zextar interrupted. We're dealing with civilians. There's a significant difference between their military response capabilities and a transport vessel full of farmers and engineers. The aide nodded reluctantly, but Zextar could see the doubt in his eyes. It didn't matter. Orders were orders, and the Krillian Empire had not conquered half the galaxy by backing down from unknown threats. Signal the fleet, Zextar commanded. We move to intercept the human colony ship in 6 hours. Standard capture protocols apply. Disable their engines, board the vessel, secure the passengers for interrogation. As his officers dispersed to carry out his orders, Zextar remained on the bridge, studying the star charts. The human ship would pass through the Kepler Nebula in approximately 18 hours, a perfect location for an ambush. The nebula's electromagnetic interference would mask their approach and prevent the humans from calling for help. It would be a textbook operation. Clean, efficient, and educational. He had no way of knowing that his decision to intercept that colony ship would trigger the largest military mobilization in human history, or that within 72 hours, the phrase, "never attack humans," would be carved into the hull of every Krillian vessel still capable of flight. The young aide returned to his station, pulling up detailed scans of the human vessel. Sir, I've completed the tactical analysis of the colony ship. It's designated the New Horizon, registered out of Earth's colonial authority. Zextar glanced at the data, noting the ship's basic specifications. Standard fusion drives, minimal shielding, no visible weapon systems. Exactly what he expected from a civilian transport. Passenger manifest, he asked. Approximately 10,000 individuals, mostly families with children. The crew appears to be standard merchant marine, with a small security detail of perhaps 50 personnel. Military experience? Unknown, sir. Human record-keeping is extensive but difficult to decode. However, given that this is a civilian vessel, we can assume minimal combat training. Zextar nodded, satisfied. 50 security personnel against his battle fleet of 12 heavy cruisers and 40 destroyer-class vessels. The humans wouldn't even have time to surrender before his boarding parties secured the ship. One more thing, sir, the aide added hesitantly. Our deep space monitors have detected increased communication traffic from human space. Multiple colonies are broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Content. We haven't been able to decrypt the messages, but the pattern suggests some kind of warning system has been activated. Zextar considered this information. It was possible that news of Velquan's encounter had reached human command structures, triggering heightened alert status across their territories. If so, it would make future operations more difficult, but shouldn't affect their current mission. Maintain monitoring, he ordered. If human military forces begin moving toward our position, we'll adjust our timeline accordingly. The bridge returned to its normal rhythm of activity as the crew prepared for the upcoming operation. Zextar moved to his private quarters, reviewing everything they knew about human military doctrine and technology. Most of their information came from third-party sources, species that had encountered humans in trade or diplomatic contexts rather than combat. The reports painted a contradictory picture. Humans were described as both peaceful and aggressive, logical yet emotional, individually weak but collectively dangerous. Such inconsistencies usually indicated incomplete intelligence or deliberate misinformation. Zextar activated his personal communication array and sent a coded message to Intelligence Command on the Krillian homeworld. If these humans proved more challenging than expected, he wanted backup plans in place. The response came back within minutes. Proceed with mission. All available data suggests human military capabilities are within manageable parameters. Exercise standard caution, but do not allow unfounded rumors to compromise operational objectives. Satisfied, Zextar began reviewing the tactical plans for the coming engagement. The Kepler Nebula would provide excellent cover for their approach, and its electromagnetic interference would prevent the humans from transmitting distress signals. They would strike fast and hard, disabling the colony ship before its crew could react. What he didn't know was that the New Horizon was already had been transmitting since the moment it left Earth's solar system. Every human vessel, civilian or military, carried what their designers called a quantum entanglement beacon, a communication system that operated outside normal space-time constraints and was completely undetectable by conventional scanning methods. The moment Admiral Velquan's ships had fired on that listening post, every human vessel in the galaxy had received the same message. Protocol 7 is now in effect. All civilian craft are to maintain constant communication with Terran Defense Command. Any interruption of contact will trigger immediate military response. The New Horizons passengers went about their daily routines, unaware that their ship had become the most closely monitored vessel in human space. In the cargo bays, children played games and attended classes. In the observation decks, families watched the stars drift by and dreamed of their new home on Vega Prime. And, in a heavily shielded compartment deep in the ship's core, 50 men and women who were definitely not standard merchant marine crew checked their weapons and reviewed tactical protocols that would have surprised even Zextar's intelligence analysts. The New Horizon was indeed a colony ship, carrying 10,000 civilians to a new world. But it was also something else entirely, a carefully laid trap, designed to look irresistibly vulnerable to any predator foolish enough to attack human civilians. As the Krillian fleet moved to intercept, racing through hyperspace toward their rendezvous with destiny in the Kepler Nebula, quantum messages flashed between Earth and a dozen nearby systems. Military bases that had been quietly established over the past 50 years suddenly came online, their crews emerging from stasis to man weapons systems that most galactic civilizations couldn't even comprehend. The trap was set, the bait was in position, and somewhere in the depths of human space, Protocol 7 entered its final phase. Commander Zextar had made his choice. Now he would learn why. Across the galaxy, the wisest predators whispered a simple truth. Never attack humans. Fleeing won't be an option. The Kepler Nebula stretched across space like a cosmic spider web, its brilliant purple and gold gases creating beautiful patterns that masked deadly electromagnetic storms. Commander Zextar watched the swirling colors through his flagship's viewports as his fleet moved into position, their ships' hulls gleaming against the nebula's ethereal glow. "Target acquired, sir," reported his tactical officer, a seasoned veteran whose scarred hide told stories of countless battles. "The human colony ship is proceeding on course, estimated arrival at intercept point in 47 minutes. Zextar studied the holographic display showing his fleet's positioning. 12 heavy cruisers formed the primary attack formation, while 40 destroyers spread out in a wide net to prevent escape. It was massive overkill for a single civilian transport, but he preferred overwhelming force to unexpected surprises. "Any change in the target's behavior?" he asked. "Negative, sir. They're maintaining standard civilian cruise speed, broadcasting normal identification signals. No indication they've detected our presence." "Perfect." The electromagnetic interference from the nebula was working exactly as planned, masking their approach while jamming any potential distress calls from the human vessel. By the time the colony ship realized they were under attack, it would be far too late to call for help. "Sir," another officer called from the communications station, "we're receiving fragmentary transmissions from the outer sensor grid. It appears Admiral Velquan's fleet has been located." Zextar turned sharply. "Status report." "Unknown, sir." The transmission cut off mid-sentence, but the source location suggests they were near the Proxima system, approximately 40 light-years from their last known position. 40 light-years. Velquan's fleet had covered impressive distance in their retreat, yet the humans had still found them. Zextar felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. Velquan had made the mistake of engaging human military forces directly. This operation would be different, quick, clean, and against defenseless civilians. Maintain communications silence, he ordered. We don't want to give the humans any way to track our location. The minutes ticked by with mechanical precision as the trap closed around the unsuspecting colony ship. Zextar watched the tactical display, noting how perfectly the human vessel maintained its course. No evasive maneuvers, no course corrections, no indication they suspected anything unusual. Intercept in 15 minutes, sir. Zextar activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels, this is Commander Zextar. Execute capture protocol on my mark. Primary objectives are intact vessel and live prisoners for interrogation. Disable their engines and communications, then prepare boarding parties. Remember, these are civilians. They should surrender quickly once they realize resistance is futile. Acknowledgements came back from all 52 ships in his fleet. Zextar felt the familiar thrill of impending victory coursing through his system. Soon he would have human prisoners to study, their technology to analyze, their weaknesses to exploit. Target in visual range, sir. The main display shifted to show the new horizon emerging from the nebula's interference field. It was larger than Zextar had expected, nearly 3 kilometers in length, its hull gleaming white with blue accents. Solar collection panels lined its dorsal surface, while massive engine assemblies dominated the rear section. It looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a peaceful colony ship carrying families to a new world. Fascinating, Zextar murmured, studying the vessel's design. Human engineering appeared functional but unimaginative, prioritizing efficiency over aesthetics. He could see observation decks and recreational areas, clear evidence of the civilian nature of the ship's passengers. Commander, his tactical officer reported, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the target vessel. Weapons? Zextar asked sharply. Negative, sir. The readings appear to be consistent with advanced life support and recreational systems. Possibly some kind of entertainment network for the passengers. Zextar nodded, satisfied. Of course civilians would prioritize comfort systems over military hardware. It reinforced his assessment that this would be an easy capture. All ships, prepare to execute on my mark, he announced. 3, 2, 1 mark. The Krillian fleet erupted from the nebula like a pack of predators, their weapons systems powering up in perfect synchronization. Energy beams lanced out toward the New Horizons engines while electromagnetic pulse generators prepared to disable the human ship's communications and defensive systems. But something was wrong. Instead of the expected panic and confusion, the New Horizons response was immediate and coordinated. The massive colony ship suddenly shed its outer hull plating, revealing a completely different vessel underneath. What had appeared to be civilian quarters and observation decks were actually armored weapon ports, and what had seemed like entertainment systems were sophisticated military sensor arrays. Sir, his tactical officer screamed, that's not a colony ship. It's the New Horizons transformation completed in seconds. The peaceful civilian transport was gone, replaced by something that made Zextar's blood freeze in his veins. The vessel before them was clearly military, but like nothing in any intelligence database. Its weapons systems were already powering up, and the energy readings were off the charts. Evasive maneuvers, Zextar shouted, but it was too late. The human vessel opened fire. The first salvo was unlike anything Zextar had ever witnessed. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, the New Horizon launched what appeared to be small metallic spheres. They moved slowly at first, almost lazily, giving the Krillian commanders time to wonder what possible threat such objects could pose. Then, the spheres reached their target coordinates and detonated. The explosions tore through space-time itself, creating localized gravity wells that crushed everything within their radius. 3 of Zextar's destroyers simply ceased to exist, compressed into points of matter so dense that light couldn't escape. The gravitational shockwaves sent the remaining ships tumbling out of formation. What in the depths of space was that? Zextar gasped, pulling himself up from where the gravity wave had thrown him against his command chair. Unknown weapon type, sir, his tactical officer reported, his scales pale with terror. I've never seen anything that can manipulate gravitational fields on that scale. The New Horizon was already launching a second volley, and this time Zextar could see that the colony ship had revealed weapon ports along its entire hull. What had seemed like a single vessel was actually a mobile weapons platform of unprecedented size and firepower. All ships, return fire. Target their weapon systems. The Krillian fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams, fusion missiles, and particle accelerators focused their fury on the human vessel. The combined firepower should have been more than enough to cripple even a heavily armored battle cruiser. The human ship's shields absorbed the attack without even fluctuating. Impossible, Zextar breathed. No single vessel can have shields that powerful. His communications officer was frantically working his controls, trying to establish contact with the rest of the fleet. Sir, I can't reach 7 of our destroyer squadrons. They're not responding to any signals. Destroyed? No, sir, I don't think so. Their last transmissions suggest they encountered some kind of interference. Reports of massive energy signatures emerging from empty space. Zextar's tactical mind raced. The humans hadn't just disguised one ship. They had somehow concealed an entire fleet in the nebula. But that was impossible. The electromagnetic interference would have prevented any kind of coordination between multiple vessels, unless they had technology that operated outside normal communications parameters. The human weapon wasn't just destroying his ships. It was learning from each engagement, adjusting its targeting algorithms, and adapting its attack patterns to counter Krillian defensive measures. Sir, emergency transmission coming in from Destroyer Group 4. The message was brief and terrifying. This is Captain Nextal. We're under attack by forces that shouldn't exist. They're using our own weapons against us, somehow turning our missiles back on our ships. Request immediate. The transmission cut to static. Commander, his sensor operator called out, his voice cracking with fear. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the nebula. Whatever's out there, there's a lot of it. Zextar stared at the tactical display as more Krillian ships winked out of existence. His perfectly planned ambush had become a slaughter, and he still didn't understand what they were fighting. Then, the nebula around them began to change. The purple and gold gases that had provided such beautiful camouflage started to shift and swirl in patterns that definitely weren't natural. As Zextar watched in growing horror, the electromagnetic interference that had masked their approach began to fade, revealing shapes hidden in the cosmic fog. Ships, dozens of them, all human, all massive, all focused directly on his fleet. How, he whispered. How did they know we were coming? His communication officer looked up from his station, his expression grim. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from the human vessel. They're requesting to speak with you directly. On screen, the main display shifted to show the bridge of the New Horizon, and Zextar found himself face to face with a human for the first time. The creature was smaller than he had expected, with pale skin and dark hair, but there was something in its eyes that made Zextar's predator instincts recoil. Commander Zextar of the Krillian Empire, the human said in perfect Krillian, I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You have committed an act of aggression against civilian colonists under the protection of Earth. I am authorized to offer you one opportunity to surrender your forces and submit to interrogation regarding your military capabilities and intentions. Zextar's pride flared. We are Krillian warriors. We do not surrender to inferior species. Captain Chin's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. I see. In that case, you should know that your empire has already been classified as a hostile force under Protocol 7. Effective immediately, all Krillian military assets will be considered legitimate targets for termination. You're bluffing, Zextar snarled. You have a handful of ships hidden in a nebula. The Krillian Empire has millions of vessels across hundreds of systems. You cannot possibly. Commander, Chen interrupted. 3 hours ago, your Admiral Velquan fired on a human listening post. 2 hours ago, his fleet was completely destroyed. 1 hour ago, every major Krillian military installation in your home system went offline simultaneously. And 5 minutes ago, your high command surrendered unconditionally to prevent the complete annihilation of your species. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems as Zextar processed what he had just heard. It was impossible. The Krillian Empire was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They couldn't be defeated in a matter of hours by a species most galactic civilizations had barely heard of. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Check your long-range communications," Chin suggested. "I believe you'll find them quite illuminating." With growing dread, Zextar signaled his communications officer to scan for transmissions from Krillian space. The results appeared on his tactical display, and his heart seemed to stop beating. Every major Krillian military frequency was broadcasting the same message, over and over. "This is High Admiral Kexran of the Krillian Imperial Fleet. All Krillian forces are ordered to stand down immediately and prepare for unconditional surrender. The Empire has been defeated. Resistance will result in total extinction of our species. This is not a deception. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that render further conflict impossible. Stand down. Surrender. Survive." "How?" Zextar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Chen leaned forward slightly. "Commander, your species made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because our colonies appear vulnerable, our military capabilities must be limited. You failed to consider that in a universe full of predators, the most dangerous species is often the one that looks like prey." The truth hit Zextar like a physical blow. The human colonies weren't defenseless because humanity was weak. They were defenseless because they didn't need to be defended. Because somewhere in human space, forces existed that could reach anywhere in the galaxy and destroy any threat before it could pose a danger to human civilians. "The colony ship," he said, understanding flooding through him. "This was all a trap. The New Horizon and her passengers are indeed colonists," Chen confirmed. "They're also volunteers who agreed to serve as bait to draw out species hostile to human expansion. Every person aboard this vessel knew there was a chance they would be attacked, and they came anyway because they believe in humanity's right to spread among the stars." Zextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, seeing his own horror reflected in their expressions. They had attacked what they thought were helpless civilians, only to discover they had walked into a carefully prepared killing ground. "What happens to us now?" he asked. "That depends on you, Commander. Your empire has surrendered, but your fleet fired on human civilians. Under our military code, that makes you war criminals. However, if you cooperate fully with our intelligence-gathering efforts and provide complete information about any other species that might threaten human colonies, we might be persuaded to show mercy." Zextar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decisions crushing down on him. In trying to capture a single human transport, he had triggered the destruction of everything his species had built across centuries of conquest. "I'll need to consult with my officers," he said. "You have 10 minutes to decide," Chen replied. "After that, my orders are to eliminate any remaining resistance." The transmission ended, leaving Zextar alone with the consequences of his choices. Around him, the nebula continued to reveal more human vessels, ships that defied everything he thought he knew about military engineering and tactical doctrine. He had learned too late the wisdom that older, more cautious species had whispered across the galaxy. Never attack humans. Fleeing won't be an option. The trap had closed, and there was nowhere left to run. 10 minutes had never felt so long. Commander Zextar stood in the center of his bridge, watching the chronometer tick down while around him, the remnants of his once mighty fleet waited for his decision. Through the viewports, human vessels continued to emerge from the nebula like ghosts materializing from the void, each one a testament to capabilities he was only beginning to comprehend. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "I'm reading energy buildups on at least 40 human vessels. If they open fire simultaneously, our shields won't last 30 seconds, Zextar finished grimly. He had run the calculations himself. Even with their remaining ships fighting desperately, they would be overwhelmed in moments by the sheer firepower arrayed against them. 5 minutes remaining. "Commander," came Captain Chen's voice over the communication channel. There was no gloating in her tone, no satisfaction at their predicament. If anything, she sounded almost regretful. Zextar's personal communicator chimed, indicating an incoming transmission on a secured channel. The identity signature made his blood run cold. It was from Admiral Kexran, the highest military authority in the Krillian Empire. Commander Zextar, the familiar voice crackled through the static of interstellar communication. I am transmitting this message from what remains of our high command bunker on Krillix Prime. The situation is worse than anything we could have imagined. The Admiral's image appeared on Zextar's personal display, and the sight was shocking. Kexran's once pristine uniform was torn and burned, his scales dulled with exhaustion and defeat. Behind him, Zextar could see the command center of their homeworld's military headquarters. But it was wrong somehow. The walls were twisted, the ceiling partially collapsed. What happened? Zextar breathed. The humans didn't attack our worlds directly, Kexran explained, his voice hollow with disbelief. They did something far worse. 3 hours ago, every one of our quantum communication networks simply stopped working. Every computer system connected to our military grid began displaying the same message. You have 20 minutes to evacuate all military personnel from your installations. Zextar felt his heart skip a beat. Evacuation? But why would they? Because what happened next defied every law of physics we understand. Commander, the humans reached through our computer networks and altered the fundamental properties of matter within our military bases. They turned our own infrastructure against us. The implications hit Zextar like a physical blow. That's impossible. You can't affect physical matter through quantum communication channels. Tell that to the crater where Fleet Command used to be. Kexran replied bitterly. Or the twisted metal sculpture that was once our primary shipyard. The humans didn't just hack our networks, Zextar. They used our networks to rewrite the basic structure of our military assets. On his personal display, Zextar could see data files streaming in from Krillian space. Images of their mighty fortress worlds, their shipyards, their weapon foundries. All of them had been transformed into abstract art pieces of impossible geometry, their molecular structure altered in ways that turned deadly weapons into harmless sculptures. But our ships in deep space, Zextar protested, the ones not connected to the networks, gone, Kexran confirmed. All of them. The humans sent what they called hunter-killer protocols through hyperspace itself. Every Krillian vessel not actively surrendering simply ceased to function. Their weapons turned into flowers. Their armor became transparent crystal. Their engines were replaced with holographic projectors showing images of human children playing. The chronometer showed 2 minutes remaining. Around Zextar, his bridge crew listened in growing horror as the true scope of humanity's capabilities became clear. How? Zextar asked. How is any of this possible? That's what I asked their representative, Kexran said. Do you know what she told me? She said that humans have been studying every species in the galaxy for over 200 years. Every transmission we've ever sent, every piece of technology we've ever deployed, every tactical doctrine we've ever employed, they've cataloged and analyzed all of it. 200 years? But first contact was only 5 years ago, yes. But the humans have been watching us far longer than that. They've been studying our weaknesses, our psychology, our technology, preparing for the day when one of us would be foolish enough to attack their civilians. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place for Zextar. Humans weren't a newly emerged species stumbling blindly into galactic politics. They were apex predators who had been studying their potential prey for centuries before revealing themselves. Commander Zextar, Captain Chin's voice interrupted his thoughts. 1 minute remaining. Zextar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his species' future pressing down on him. Everything they had built, everything they had conquered, all of it had been rendered meaningless in a matter of hours by beings they had dismissed as primitives. Admiral, he said quietly, what are your orders? Kexran's expression was grim, but resolute. Surrender, Zextar. Cooperate fully with their intelligence gathering. And pray to whatever gods still listen that they choose to show us mercy. The transmission ended, leaving Zextar alone with his decision. He looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, warriors who had followed him into battle without question, who had trusted his judgment and tactical expertise. Now their lives hung in the balance of his choice. Time, Commander, Chin announced. Zextar straightened his uniform and activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels, this is Commander Zextar. By order of High Admiral Kexran and the Imperial High Command, we are surrendering to human forces. Power down all weapons systems and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of our remaining ships. The acknowledgements came back quickly, his officers' voices heavy with defeat and confusion. Across his fleet, weapon systems went dark and shields powered down. In minutes, his proud warships had been reduced to helpless hulks drifting in space. Captain Chun, Zextar transmitted. The Krillian fleet surrenders unconditionally. Acknowledged, Commander. Please prepare for boarding. My teams will be transferring your personnel to secure holding areas for processing. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, Zextar found himself looking at something that made his predator instincts scream in terror. The human boarding craft approaching his ship weren't the simple assault shuttles he had expected. They were moving through space without any visible propulsion, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. What are those things? His tactical officer whispered. I believe, Zextar said slowly, that we're about to find out why fleeing isn't an option when you attack humans. The boarding craft passed through his ship's hull as if it weren't there, phasing into the hangar bay without triggering any of the airlock systems. Zextar watched through the internal security feeds as figures in powered armor emerged from vessels that definitely didn't obey conventional physics. But it wasn't the technology that made his blood freeze, it was the way the humans moved. Every step was precise, calculated, perfectly coordinated with their team members. These weren't soldiers boarding an enemy vessel. These were scientists conducting an experiment, and Zextar's crew were the test subjects. Sir, his communications officer called out. I'm receiving detailed instructions from the human boarding teams. They're requesting that all senior officers report to Conference Room 7 for debriefing. Debriefing or interrogation? The humans were quite specific, sir. They called it educational opportunity for mutual benefit, whatever that means. Zextar almost smiled despite the situation. Even in surrender, the humans were playing games, using language that sounded diplomatic while making it clear that cooperation wasn't optional. Very well. Senior staff to Conference Room 7. Everyone else remains at their stations until further notice. The walk to the conference room felt like a journey to execution. Zextar's senior officers followed him through corridors that suddenly felt alien despite being his own ship. The human boarding teams had somehow transformed the very atmosphere of the vessel, filling it with a sense of being observed, analyzed, cataloged. When they reached Conference Room 7, they found it had been completely transformed. The standard Krillian military furniture was gone, replaced with chairs and tables that seemed to adjust themselves automatically to accommodate different species' physiology. Holographic displays showed star charts and tactical information that definitely wasn't from Krillian databases. 3 humans waited for them, and Zextar was struck by how different they were from each other. Captain Chun was there, still in her military uniform, but beside her sat an elderly man in civilian clothes whose eyes held depths of knowledge that made Zextar uncomfortable. The 3rd human was younger, wearing the insignia of some kind of scientist or researcher. Commander Zextar, Chun said as they entered. Thank you for your cooperation. Please, be seated. I'd like you to meet Dr. Harrison Reed, our xenopsychology specialist, and Dr. Amanda Foster, our technology integration expert. Zextar and his officers took their seats, the chairs automatically adjusting to their reptilian physiology. The casual display of advanced technology wasn't lost on him. These humans had known exactly what species they would be dealing with and had prepared accordingly. Before we begin, Dr. Reed said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to dealing with alien minds, I want to make something clear. You're not prisoners of war, Commander. You're students. Students. Zextar's tactical officer couldn't hide his confusion. Students in a very important lesson, Dr. Foster added, activating a holographic display that showed the current positions of every major military force in the galaxy. A lesson about why humanity chose to reveal themselves to the galactic community when they did, and why that timing was crucial for everyone's survival. The display shifted, showing data that made Zextar's head spin. ship movements, communication intercepts, resource allocations, information spanning dozens of species across hundreds of star systems. For the past 2 centuries, Dr. Reed explained, we've been watching the galaxy tear itself apart. Species after species falling into the same pattern. Expand, conquer, dominate, then, eventually encounter something bigger and stronger that destroys them. The Androxa Crystalline Empire, Chen added, highlighting a section of the display. Destroyed by the Sectai Hive, who were subsequently crushed by your Krillian Empire, who would have eventually been conquered by the Forlac Confederation, who are currently being infiltrated by the Shadow Fleet of the Eternal Throne. Zextar stared at the display, seeing patterns he had never recognized before. You're saying we're all doomed? Without intervention, yes, Dr. Foster confirmed. Every aggressive species in this galaxy is following the same self-destructive path. The strong devour the weak until they encounter something stronger. It's a cycle that ends with either total extinction or the dominance of a single species that eventually stagnates and collapses. So you decided to intervene, Zextar said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. We decided to break the cycle, Chen corrected, by demonstrating that there's an alternative to endless warfare. That cooperation and mutual benefit can be more powerful than conquest and domination. Dr. Reed leaned forward. Commander, your species has incredible talents. Your tactical minds, your industrial capabilities, your courage in battle. These are valuable assets that could benefit everyone. But only if channeled toward construction rather than destruction. What are you proposing? Zextar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Partnership, Dr. Foster said simply. The Krillian Empire becomes part of a larger coalition dedicated to protecting developing civilizations from the kind of predatory expansion that nearly destroyed your own species. The irony wasn't lost on Zextar. The humans were offering his people the chance to become guardians instead of conquerors, protectors instead of predators. And if we refuse? Chen's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then, you'll discover what happens to species that refuse to evolve beyond their destructive instincts. The threat was delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took Zextar a moment to process its implications. The humans weren't just offering partnership, they were offering survival. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. I'll need to discuss this with my government, Zextar said. Of course, Dr. Reed agreed. But I should mention that we've already had similar conversations with representatives of 17 other major galactic powers. The Forlac Confederation, the Eternal Throne, even the mysterious sphere builders have agreed to participate. You've been doing this across the entire galaxy? Today was what we call Revelation Day, Dr. Foster explained. The day humanity revealed its true capabilities to every major military power simultaneously. Some, like your empire, learned through direct confrontation. Others were simply shown what we could do to their infrastructure if they chose to continue their aggressive expansion. Zextar felt a chill as he realized the true scope of what had happened. This hadn't been a battle or a war. It had been a coordinated demonstration of power across dozens of star systems. Time to reshape the entire galactic political landscape in a single day. You've been planning this for centuries, he said. Planning, preparing, and waiting for the right moment, Chen confirmed. Today, Commander, the galaxy changed. The age of endless warfare is over. The age of cooperation has begun. Whether we like it or not, Zextar added grimly. Whether you like it or not, Dr. Reed agreed. But I think you'll find that peace is far more rewarding than war, especially when the alternative is extinction. The meeting continued for hours, with the humans patiently explaining their vision for the galaxy's future and the Krillians' role in it. As the details became clear, Zextar found himself grudgingly impressed by the scope and complexity of humanity's long-term planning. They hadn't just defeated the Krillian Empire, they had offered it a chance to become something greater than it had ever been as conquerors. The lesson was complete, and Zextar finally understood why the warning had spread across the galaxy. Never attack humans. Fleeing won't be an option. Because humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They transformed them into allies, whether they wanted to be or not. 6 months had passed since what the galaxy now called the Great Revelation. and former Commander Zextar found himself in a situation he never could have imagined. He stood on the observation deck of the Terran Defense Station Prometheus, watching human and Krillian engineers work side by side to retrofit captured Krillian vessels with new defensive technologies. "Strange, isn't it?" came a familiar voice behind him. Zextar turned to see Dr. Harrison Reed approaching, carrying 2 cups of a steaming beverage that had become surprisingly popular among reformed Krillian officers. The humans called it coffee, and, despite its bitter taste, Zextar found it helped him focus during the long strategy sessions that had become his new reality. "What's strange, Doctor?" Zextar accepted the cup gratefully, noting how the ceramic automatically adjusted its temperature to match his species' preferences. "6 months ago, you were trying to capture human civilians. Now you're helping us design protection protocols for developing civilizations across 3 sectors." Zextar sipped his coffee, watching a team of mixed-species engineers debate the optimal placement of defensive shield generators on a former Krillian dreadnought. "6 months ago, I thought I understood what strength meant. And now I'm learning that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to use that ability." Dr. Reed joined him at the observation window. "Tell me about the Zelthra situation. Your species has more experience with hive-mind civilizations than we do." Zextar activated his personal display, showing tactical readouts from the Zelthra system. A developing species had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and had immediately begun expanding aggressively, following the same pattern that had once driven his own people. "The Zelthra queens believe that expansion equals survival," Zextar explained. "Their homeworld has limited resources, so their instinct is to take what they need from others. It's logical from their perspective, but ultimately self-destructive." "Recommendations?" Zextar studied the data, his tactical mind now focused on protection rather than conquest. "A demonstration, but not destruction. Show them what happens when they encounter a species capable of fighting back. Then, offer them an alternative." "The Madagascar Protocol?" "Exactly. Isolate their expansion fleet, disable their weapons without casualties, then introduce them to the concept of trade and cooperation." Zextar paused, remembering his own first encounter with human capabilities. The shock of realizing they're not the apex predators they thought they were should make them receptive to negotiation. Dr. Reed nodded approvingly. "I'll pass your recommendations to the Intervention Council. Speaking of which, you have a briefing with Captain Chun in an hour." As Dr. Reed departed, Zextar remained at the observation window, reflecting on how drastically his life had changed. The Krillian Empire still existed, but it had been transformed from a conquering force into something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that used its military expertise to protect the weak rather than exploit them. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many Krillian officers had struggled to adapt to their new role, their predatory instincts conflicting with human ideals of cooperation and mutual benefit. But the alternative, extinction, had proven to be a powerful motivator for change. His personal communicator chimed, indicating a priority message from the Krillian homeworld. The identity signature made him smile despite himself. Admiral Kexran, who now held the position of Krillian ambassador to the Galactic Protection Council. Zextar, Kexran's voice was stronger now, more confident than it had been during those dark hours immediately following the Great Revelation. "I have news from the home system that I think you'll find interesting." "Positive news, I hope." "More than positive. Our industrial conversion program has exceeded all expectations. The shipyards that once produced conquest fleets are now building exploration vessels and research stations. Our weapon foundries are manufacturing defensive technologies for developing worlds. And our people." Kexran paused, and Zextar could hear the wonder in his voice. "Our people are thriving in ways I never imagined possible." "How so?" "Purpose, Zextar. For the first time in our history, our warriors fight not just for territory or resources, but for ideals. They risk their lives to protect civilizations they've never met, species they've never encountered. And they do it willingly, proudly." Zextar felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite identify. Pride, perhaps, but not the old pride of conquest. Something deeper and more satisfying. "I have a mission proposal for you," Kexran continued. The humans have identified a situation in the outer rim that requires specialized expertise. What kind of situation? Remember the Shadow Fleet that Dr. Foster mentioned during your initial briefing? They've begun moving against a cluster of developing worlds in the Korak sector. The humans want to intervene, but they need someone with experience in deep space infiltration tactics. Zextar's tactical mind immediately began analyzing possibilities. The Shadow Fleet was legendary even among galactic predators, a mysterious force that appeared without warning, stripped worlds of resources, then vanished back into the void. No one had ever seen their ships clearly enough to identify their technology or origin. What's the human assessment of their capabilities? He asked. Unknown, which is why they want Krillian expertise. Your people have the best stealth technology in the galaxy, and your experience with hit and run tactics might be crucial for gathering intelligence. When do we deploy? The briefing is tomorrow on Prometheus Station. Captain Chun will be leading the human contingent, but she's requested you as tactical advisor. After the call ended, Zextar made his way to his quarters, his mind already working through the complexities of the upcoming mission. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he would have been planning how to exploit the Shadow Fleet situation for Krillian advantage. Now he was preparing to risk his life to protect civilizations his species had never even heard of. The next morning brought the mission briefing, held in the Prometheus Station's main tactical center. Zextar arrived to find Captain Chin already there, along with representatives from several other species that had undergone their own versions of the Great Revelation. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other classifications, Chin began. We're here to discuss Operation Lighthouse, our response to Shadow Fleet activity in the Korak sector. The holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the target region. Zextar studied it with professional interest, noting the positioning of developing worlds and the pattern of Shadow Fleet attacks. Intelligence suggests the Shadow Fleet has been systematically harvesting resources from pre-spaceflight civilizations, Chin continued. They appear to be building towards something significant, but we don't know what. Have there been any survivors from attacked worlds? Asked Commander Vex High, a former enemy of the Krillians who now served as a tactical specialist for the Protection Council. Few, and their reports are inconsistent. Some describe ships that phase in and out of normal space. Others report technology that seems to manipulate time itself. The only constant is that entire planetary populations disappear overnight. Zextar felt a chill. Even during the Krillian Empire's most aggressive expansion, they had never simply eliminated entire civilizations. There had always been strategic value in conquered populations, as workers, soldiers, or sources of information. What kind of resources are they taking? He asked. That's the disturbing part, Chin replied, highlighting affected systems on the display. They're not taking conventional resources. No rare metals, no energy sources, no industrial materials. They're taking biological matter, specifically complex organic neural networks. Brains, Commander Vexhai said bluntly. More than brains. They're harvesting entire nervous systems from every sentient species they encounter. The question is, why? Dr. Foster stepped forward. Our xenobiologists have a theory. Based on the pattern of harvesting and the technological signatures we've detected, they believe the Shadow Fleet is building some kind of distributed consciousness, a galaxy-spanning artificial intelligence powered by the neural patterns of countless species. The implications hit Zextar immediately. They're not just conquering worlds. They're harvesting the minds of entire civilizations to power some kind of superintelligence. Exactly. And, if they succeed, that intelligence would have access to the collected knowledge, memories, and capabilities of every species they've absorbed. The briefing continued for several hours, covering everything from Shadow Fleet movement patterns to proposed intervention strategies. When it ended, Zextar found himself walking alongside Captain Chun toward the station's tactical planning center. I have to ask, Chun said as they moved through the corridor, how does it feel to be on this side of a protection mission? Zextar considered the question carefully. Strange, but satisfying in ways I never experienced during conquest campaigns. When we fought to expand the Empire, victory was always temporary. There was always another enemy, another world to conquer, another battle to win. But this This feels like we're building something permanent. Something that will outlast any individual campaign or victory. They entered the planning center, where teams of mixed species analysts were already working on operational details for Operation Lighthouse. Every species that becomes a galactic predator does so for the same reason. They believe it's the only way to ensure their survival. And you proved there was another way. We proved that cooperation is more powerful than conquest, that mutual benefit creates stronger alliances than fear, and that building something together is more satisfying than taking something alone. Chen gestured toward the mixed species teams working around them. Look at them, Zextar. Look at what they're accomplishing together. Zextar did look, and what he saw filled him with something he had never felt during his years as a conqueror. Hope. Hope that the galaxy could be something better than an endless cycle of warfare and domination. The Shadow Fleet, he said. They represent the old way of thinking. Take what you need, destroy what you don't understand, accumulate power at any cost. Exactly. And that's why they have to be stopped. Not just because they're threatening innocent civilizations, but because they represent everything we're trying to move beyond. As they began reviewing tactical plans for the upcoming mission, Zextar reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a conqueror planning the capture of human civilians. Now he was a protector preparing to risk everything to defend species he had never met. The transformation had been complete, but more than that, it had been willing, because the humans had shown him and his people something more valuable than conquest: purpose. A reason to fight that went beyond simple survival or territorial expansion. The Shadow Fleet would learn, as Zextar had learned, that in the new galaxy humanity was building, fleeing truly wasn't an option. But not because escape was impossible, because the alternative they offered was too good to refuse. War was ending, not through force, but through the simple demonstration that peace was more powerful than any weapon ever created. The great revelation had changed everything, and Zextar was proud to be part of what came next. The edge of known space was a place of whispers and shadows, where even light seemed reluctant to penetrate the cosmic void. Former Commander Zextar floated in the observation bubble of the stealth vessel Redemption, watching long-range sensors track the mysterious movements of the Shadow Fleet through the Korak sector. It had been 3 weeks since Operation Lighthouse began, and what they had discovered defied everything anyone thought they knew about galactic warfare. The Shadow Fleet wasn't just harvesting neural matter. They were doing something far more sophisticated and terrifying. Contact, whispered his tactical officer, a young Krillian named Texvar who had volunteered for the deep reconnaissance mission. Multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace, bearing 27 Mark IV. Zextar activated his personal display, studying the sensor data as it streamed in. 6 vessels, each one roughly the size of a human dreadnought, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in any database. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, phasing in and out of detectability. Analysis? He asked quietly, keeping his voice low despite the fact that they were operating under complete stealth protocols. Unknown hull configuration. Texvar replied, his scales pale with concentration. Energy patterns suggest they're using some kind of dimensional manipulation technology. But, sir, there's something else. Report. I'm detecting neural activity signatures from within those ships. Massive amounts of it. As if there are millions of thinking beings aboard each vessel. Zextar felt his blood chill. Survivors from conquered worlds? I don't think so, sir. The patterns are too organized, too synchronized. It's more like they've been integrated into the ship's operational systems. The implications hit Zextar like a physical blow. The Shadow Fleet wasn't just harvesting neural matter to power some distant superintelligence. They were incorporating the minds of conquered species directly into their vessels, creating warships with the combined knowledge and capabilities of countless civilizations. Signal Captain Chun, he ordered. Priority transmission, full encryption. We need immediate extraction and a full strategy review. Sir, that will reveal our position to anyone monitoring communications in this sector. Zextar looked at the ghostly shapes moving across his sensors, each one a tomb containing the minds of entire species. I don't think stealth is going to help us anymore. These beings are operating on a level we're not prepared for. The transmission to Captain Chun was brief, but urgent. Intelligence gathered. Shadowfleet capabilities exceed all estimates. Recommend immediate withdrawal and strategic reassessment. The response came back within minutes. Acknowledged. Extraction team en route. Maintain position and continue observation until relieved. For the next 6 hours, Zextar and his crew watched the Shadowfleet vessels conduct what could only be described as a harvesting operation on a nearby world. Every thinking being down there, they're all connected somehow. Their minds are being linked together. On the display, Zextar could see the energy patterns as an entire civilization's consciousness was slowly drawn upward, pulled from their physical bodies, and integrated into the waiting Shadowfleet vessels. It was efficient, almost clinical, and absolutely terrifying. How long, he asked. At current rate of extraction, 18 hours until the process is complete. Zextar closed his eyes, imagining billions of individual minds being absorbed into a collective consciousness that spanned multiple starships. Each absorbed civilization would make the Shadowfleet smarter, more capable, more dangerous. Sir, incoming transmission. It's Captain Chun. The main display activated, showing Chun aboard what appeared to be a heavily modified human vessel. But something was different about her expression, a grim determination that Zextar had learned to recognize as dangerous. Zextar, we've analyzed your intelligence reports. The situation is worse than we thought. How much worse? Our xenopsychologists estimate that the Shadowfleet has already absorbed approximately 47 different species. Based on their current capabilities and expansion rate, they could threaten every major galactic civilization within 5 years. What are our options? Chin's expression grew even more serious. We're implementing Protocol Omega. Zextar felt his heart skip a beat. Protocol Omega was the theoretical last resort humanity had developed for existential threats, a response so devastating that it had never been seriously considered for use. Captain, he said carefully, Protocol Omega involves sacrificing entire star systems to contain a threat. Are you certain that's necessary? Zextar, the Shadowfleet isn't just absorbing random species. They're specifically targeting civilizations with unique mental capabilities. Telepaths from Zentari Prime, the mathematical savants of Calculus 7, the temporal perception specialists from the Chronos worlds. They're building a superintelligence with capabilities we can't even comprehend. So we stop them here. We can't stop them conventionally. Our preliminary tactical analysis suggests that engaging the Shadowfleet directly would result in complete defeat for any force we could assemble. They have the combined military knowledge of nearly 50 species, plus technologies we've never seen before. Then, what do you propose? Chen leaned forward. We're going to do what humans do best when faced with an impossible situation. We're going to change the rules of the game. The transmission ended, leaving Zextar to contemplate the implications of humanity's most desperate gambit. He had learned enough about human psychology to know that when they said they were going to change the rules, they meant something radical and probably terrifying was about to happen. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Reed. Zextar, I need you to understand something before Protocol Omega begins. What we're about to do will fundamentally alter the nature of consciousness itself within this sector of the galaxy. Every thinking being in the affected area will be changed. Changed how? We're going to link them, not like the Shadowfleet's forced absorption, but voluntary connection. Every species that agrees to participate will have their consciousness expanded to encompass the entire network. Individual identity preserved, but with access to the collective knowledge and capabilities of all participants. Zextar stared at the message, understanding flooding through him. You're creating your own superintelligence to fight theirs. More than that, we're offering every species in the galaxy a choice. Join the collective defense network and gain power beyond imagination, or remain isolated and vulnerable to Shadowfleet absorption. The ethical implications were staggering. Humanity was essentially forcing every civilization to choose between individual consciousness and collective survival. Is it reversible? Zextar asked. Unknown. This is completely unprecedented territory. But, based on our simulations, any species that joins the network will never want to leave it. The benefits are simply too great. Over the next 12 hours, Zextar watched as human vessels appeared throughout the sector, broadcasting the same offer to every inhabited world: voluntary consciousness expansion in exchange for protection from the Shadow Fleet. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species agreed to join humanity's collective defense network, their populations eagerly embracing the promise of expanded awareness and shared knowledge. But the Shadow Fleet wasn't passive. As soon as they detected the human initiative, they began accelerating their own operations, racing to absorb as many species as possible before the rival network could be completed. It's a race, Zextar realized, watching the tactical display. Humanity is trying to save civilizations by absorbing them voluntarily, while the Shadow Fleet is trying to take them by force. His communication array activated, showing Captain Chen again. But this time, there was something different about her eyes, a depth of awareness that seemed to encompass far more than any individual mind should be able to contain. "Zextar," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple consciousness speaking in unison. "The network is operational. We're ready to make you the same offer we've made to everyone else. Join the collective. Become part of something greater than yourself. Retain your individual identity while gaining access to the combined knowledge and capabilities of 17 species and growing. Help us stop the Shadow Fleet not through warfare, but through offering every threatened civilization a better alternative." Zextar looked around his ship at his crew, seeing the same questions in their eyes that he felt in his own mind. Join the collective and lose individual autonomy, or remain separate and risk Shadow Fleet absorption. "What happens to species that refuse both options?" he asked. "They remain as they are, free to make their own choices. But they also remain vulnerable to any threat they can't handle alone." It was, Zextar realized, the ultimate expression of humanity's approach to galactic politics. They didn't force compliance. They simply made the alternatives so clearly inferior that the choice became obvious. "Captain," he said slowly, "on behalf of my crew and with the authority granted to me by the Krillian government, I accept humanity's offer. Welcome to the network, Zextar." The transformation was instantaneous and overwhelming. Zextar felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his individual mind, connecting with thousands of other beings across dozens of star systems. But somehow, his sense of self remained intact, even enhanced by contact with alien perspectives and knowledge systems. Through the network, he could see the Shadow Fleet's movements with perfect clarity, understand their tactics with the combined military experience of 17 species, and coordinate defensive responses with precision that no individual commander could achieve. "This is incredible," he heard Texvar say, though the young officer's voice now carried the same harmonic complexity that marked network members. "This is evolution," came Chen's response, now clearly originating from millions of connected minds speaking as one. "The Shadow Fleet represents forced integration, consciousness absorbed and dissolved into a collective whole. We represent voluntary expansion, individual identity enhanced through collective connection." On the tactical display, Zextar could see the results of humanity's gambit. Species after species was choosing the voluntary network over Shadow Fleet absorption, creating a growing sphere of collective consciousness that expanded outward from human space. But the most remarkable thing was what happened when the two types of collective intelligence finally met. Instead of warfare, there was conversation. The Shadow Fleet, it turned out, had never encountered voluntary collective consciousness before. Their entire existence was based on taking what they needed through force. When faced with beings who offered cooperation instead of resistance, who shared knowledge freely rather than hoarding it protectively, they didn't know how to respond. "They're asking questions." Dr. Foster's voice came through the network, carrying wonder and amazement. "The Shadow Fleet Collective is trying to understand how voluntary consciousness expansion works." And in that moment, Zextar understood the true genius of humanity's approach. They hadn't defeated the Shadow Fleet through superior firepower or better tactics. They had offered them something they had been searching for all along without realizing it: willing participants instead of unwilling victims. The conversation between the two collective intelligences lasted for days, conducted through means that transcended conventional communication. When it ended, the Shadow Fleet had agreed to abandon their forced absorption methods in exchange for access to humanity's voluntary expansion techniques. The galaxy has changed, Chen announced to the network. Not through conquest or destruction, but through evolution. We've created something new, a form of collective consciousness that preserves individual identity while enabling capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. Zextar floated in his observation bubble, his expanded consciousness allowing him to perceive the vast network of connected minds that now spanned hundreds of star systems. Each individual remained unique, but all were part of something infinitely greater. The warning that had once spread through the galaxy, "Never attack humans," had become obsolete. Not because humans had become less dangerous, but because the very concept of attack had been transformed. In the new collective consciousness network, conflict was resolved through understanding, and threats were neutralized through incorporation rather than destruction. Fleeing was no longer an option, but not because escape was impossible. It was because there was nowhere left to flee to that offered anything better than what humanity had created. The age of individual species competing for dominance was over. The age of collective consciousness and voluntary cooperation had begun, and former Commander Zextar, once a predator seeking to capture human civilians, had become one of the architects of a new type of civilization that would reshape the galaxy for millions of years to come. The transformation was complete, and it was beautiful.